Hey, Sean Chandler here, and this is the start of my 500 subscriber Q&A video series. You guys asked a bunch of questions. I tried to give a bunch of answers and answer them as thoroughly as possible. So actually, I'm going to have to do several different videos because I filmed over several different days. That's why I look ridiculous in some of these, like having hair that does that in this particular video. But so there's going to be multiple different videos. Some of my answers were really long. They warranted their own separate video. I'll try and put in the description links to the time code of when each of the videos or questions are answered, and as well as to the other videos in the series. I will attempt to do so. With all that said, let's get started. Harry Thomas Pictures asks, with Star Wars Episode 8, do you think Supreme Leader Snoke could be Darth Plagieous? So, quick thoughts. I don't have any theories that I'm strongly connected to when it comes to Supreme Leader Snoke or Rey. Supreme Leader Snoke in particular, I don't have a guess. So Supreme Leader Snoke is one that I'd be, being Plagieous, I put in the category of, that's a possibility that doesn't sound terrible to me. Some of the stuff where they're like, well, he's going to be Jar Jar. I mean, I'm pretty sure that's just a joke, but it's a terrible idea, of course. Like the Boba Fett rumor about Darth Plagieous, I think it's just a terrible idea. I don't know why anybody would want that it's Mace Windu. I don't know why anybody would want that. It sounds like a terrible idea. Darth Plagieous, I hear that and I go, yeah, I mean, if we're going to bring in someone that we've heard about before, I mean, that seems to work a little bit. So I don't really have a theory though. And I'm probably 50-50 on whether it's someone we've heard of before versus he's just kind of a new person, entity we haven't heard of before. With Rey, I tend to be in the Skywalker line of thinking for the simple reason of that the lightsaber evidence. They obviously are presenting the lightsaber as clear evidence that she's connected heavily to Skywalkers. What that means, I don't know, but that would make the most sense as Star Wars traditionally has been the Skywalker saga, and so naturally you would go to another Skywalker. So that would be my first impressions on it, but I do not have strong thoughts on it, and I haven't read Darth Plagieous yet, so I haven't dug into some of the deeper mythology of who he is. Alter the Stream asks, does the VFX Oscar really matter anymore? I would argue that as of right now, it matters potentially more than ever, as there's more films than ever with special effects, doing crazier things with special effects. And I think where some of it is getting difficult with the VFX Oscar is, what do you do with The Jungle Book, a movie that's 95% CGI and one character's live action? Well, is that as VFX Oscar or is that Best Animated? That's a real question, because you go, oh, it looks lifelike and that one person's real. Okay, well, is that the reason Lego Movie wasn't nominated a few years ago, is because there was an element that with live action in it? And so I think those are the questions that get trickier and trickier. But I think the VFX Oscar really matters now, as we're at a point where you have things like The Jungle Book where it's so realistic and so incredible. And maybe that'll be where you move into a direction of VFX being, the nature of it changes from how realistic does this effect look to how interesting of a thing did they show us. So for example, in Doctor Strange, some of the special effects weren't all that good to me, and some of them were mind-blowing. All of them were really interesting looking. They came up with a creative use of special effects. They put something on screen that we had not seen before. And somewhat that's why when you think of, I think that's why a lot of the special effects in the Star Wars prequels are criticized a lot, is because even though they were state of the art at the time, even though they're incredible at the time, you were seeing things that you'd seen before. Look, spaceships flying around. Look, there's a person in front of a green screen. Look, you were seeing things that had been done potentially better or different. It wasn't fresh and new, where that same year that The Matrix came out, where for a lot of people, the stop motion stuff was new and fresh. It was like, that's interesting. That's creative. It ties into the plot. So I would guess that's more where the Oscar is going to move towards. or flow towards is this idea of not just does it look great, because almost all special effects look great today. Like the CGI on the CW these days is what CGI in movies looked like 15, 20 years ago. Not the biggest blockbusters were done great, but the lower budget stuff, the CGI on TV is at their level now. And so it's much more going to be, are you doing something really interesting that's enticing to see? Next question, Timmy asks, here's a question for you. What is your favorite and least favorite movie and TV show? It can be any show or movie. So I don't have a favorite movie at all. I did a video 2-3 months back called 15 Movies That Will Always Be With Me. And I think it talks about a little bit more of an interesting take on the best favorite. It's movies that kind of stick with you. I like all the movies on the list, but not all of them are necessarily the best movies I've ever seen. Not all of them are necessarily my favorite movies, but they're movies that just really stuck with me and have some special place in my heart. So that video would kind of tell you, answer that kind of question for you. Least favorite movie, I don't know how I'm going to edit together all these questions. So depending on how it comes together, I might have already mentioned this, but Alien 3 is my least favorite movie of all time. The simple fact of the matter is that where Alien 3 picks up, undoes the victory of Aliens, the movie that came before it. And Aliens is one of my favorite movies of all time. I love that movie. And the victories, the overcoming of obstacles, the drama, the tension, they overcome all this stuff. And then it's just undone entirely in the opening scene of Alien 3. And that's unforgivable to me. So that's my least favorite. Favorite TV show of all time of a comedy series, it's the first 4 seasons of The Office. I have to distinguish first 4 seasons because I do not like the end, or I don't hate where the series went. Well, I hate the last season, where the plot line of the last season is horrendous. And I almost stopped watching the show because it got so infuriating with where they took plot elements with Jim and Pam, and Pam having a thing with the camera guy and stuff, where I was like, if this doesn't stop in an episode or 2, I'm going to stop watching this. And this is my favorite comedy show of all time, and I might stop watching it. It's that offensive to me what they're doing with their characters. So that's a favorite. For non-comedy, I don't know. There's a lot of potential things I could, Star Trek: The Next Generation. There's a lot of things there's been a lot of great TV shows over the last 25, 30 years that I could bring up. And what tends to be the case is, I'm sure you're well aware, is that a lot of TV shows have a great season, 3 great seasons. So even with The Office, is what I just mentioned, and then they go on too long. And so some of the times it gets difficult to say which one's the best, which one's my favorite, because I'll say this is my favorite seasons. Like the show Heroes, the first season of it is incredible. The rest are awful. And there's a lot of stuff like that with TV that makes it a little bit difficult to say favorites. Least favorites? I was shocked and appalled that they did a show called The Carrie Diaries, that it was a prequel to Sex and the City. And it was like, hey, what if we took Sex and the City and we did it for teenagers? And it's the same character. And the one episode I watched of it, just like, is this what I think it's going to be? And it was. It's just a very shocking worldview to portray behavior as if normal, that's not. And to present this as something that should be romanticized and that you should be living for, it's very unsettling to me. It's very creepy to me when a TV show that's starring and about teenagers, and there's a bunch of like people in their 30s writing about the sex life of teenagers. That's very creepy to me. When it's one thing if you have an element like that in a series, but when that's the whole focus of the series, and like the episode I watched, the lead character Carrie goes to a art show, and there's like an adult just sitting there as a piece of art, naked, showing off their genitals. It's on the CW, so they're not showing anything, but like that's the artwork, is that like an underage kid is in person with a grown adult showing off their genitals. And this is like, I don't know what point they're trying to make, but it wasn't portrayed as this is all crazy. And this person, no, I mean, it was like, yeah, life is weird. It's like, I don't know. I really did not like it. Beyond that, a lot of the reality television shows that are just playing off of personality. I mean, I've never seen Keeping Up with the Kardashians, but some of that stuff I think is just kind of toxic to culture at a certain point. And I don't want to point it, I'm not saying Keeping Up with the Kardashians, because like I said, I can't do that because I've never seen it, but a certain level of just our obsession with other people that drives them to the inherent nature of it is feeding an unhealthy ego in another person, in the sense of, I need people to notice me. I need people to pay attention to me. And so then we make a TV show about watching them, and they want to be noticed. And so our TV show is all about noticing them. And it's kind of driving really unhealthy behavior. There was one on, I don't remember who she was. She was a Playboy model in the early 90s, and she married a 93-year-old man or something like that when she was 25 or something. And I'm just blanking on her name at the moment. And she died like 5-6 years ago. It was very tragic, very weird life story, and very unsettling, a lot of the details of her life. And they had a reality show about her in the early zeros that the show was basically, hey, look at her. She's gotten fat and she's a bad mom, because she was like a teenage mom and then became a stripper, a Playboy model, marries a 90-year-old man, and clearly was not a stable person, clearly had big issues, and was just seeking fame and seeking fame. And I remember watching an episode of the show where she's having an eating contest with her teenage son, and her son's like, Mom, I don't want to do this. Like, this is embarrassing. He's like, you need to, and berates him. And when you see stuff like that, and you're watching something that's incredibly fascinating to watch, kind of funny to watch, but it's kind of the worst aspects of our culture, this obsession with celebrity and baiting celebrities to the edge of sanity, to the edge of wisdom, until they go over, and then we berate them for it. And then when they're like desperately just trying to figure out what they're doing with their life, we're like, hey, we'll pay you to go to rehab and we want to film it. Hey, we'll pay you to... And that stuff is really a gross part of our society. So I didn't list the show, but that type of thing really bothers me. The SilverScreen Analysis asks, if you had to reboot a comic book character or introduce a new one for a film, who would the character be, who would star, and direct? Well, so my pick's kind of going to be a bit of a cheap, obvious answer, but I'm going to go broad answer is basically the DC universe. Broad, easy answer. And the simple reason is that all along, really since Batman 1989, Warner Brothers has been much more interested in doing a interesting film, interesting interpretation of their characters, than a faithful interpretation of their films. And you can just go along with the films that they've put out almost all along, and they keep going for these takes that are interesting. So like Tim Burton is a weird director. That's kind of what he was always known for. And so then you look at Batman 1989, which very good film, very important for comic books and movies, huge part of transitioning things, but kind of a weird movie. Because it's a Tim Burton movie, but then it's also got like Prince music playing, a lot of changes to the character. And then you get to the next one, Batman Returns, total freak show Tim Burton movie. You get to the Joel Schumacher movies, and you can make all the obvious jokes about bat nipples and shots of the crotches and stuff like this. But I mean, you just have to stop and think that Warner Brothers greenlit and allowed a movie where Joel Schumacher is shooting George Clooney's butt in the bat suit. Weird choice. And then all of the talk about the Superman Lives and the direction they're going, weird interpretation. And then, so then the one time they do kind of a safe throwback movie, Superman Returns, it's a throwback to a movie that was 20 years old, 25 years old at the time. It gives Superman a son. So even it is a weird interpretation of things. You go, well, the Batman Nolan films. No, the Batman Nolan films are not a great faithful adaptations of Batman. They are a very interesting interpretation of Batman, and in so that it's a very elseworld, isolated Batman universe. Batman is a part of the DC universe. Batman is not a part of just the solo stories just by himself. So by doing that and removing him from the DC universe, that is weird. It is different. It is not normal. Then you get to the Zack Snyder films. And what do you have? You've got a mopey, sad Superman that meets Lois Lane as Superman and sees his face and knows him as Superman before she knows him as Clark Kent. Once she gets to know him as Clark Kent, they already know who it is. Like, this is a weird take. And they only have gone further into the weirdness of it because we've never seen him happy saving people. So on the broad sense, I'm going to go with the DC universe. The whole thing needs to be rebooted and just go faithful. So a tried and true formula for Superman is that he's this guy. He has a loneliness to him because he's the last son of Krypton, but he was raised by great parents and so has a good heart, a good soul. You have Batman, that he's the guy that doesn't want to kill people because of the trauma that was caused to him, so he doesn't want to cause that cause to other people, and he wants to save people from that. Just basic a love for heroes, for heroism. Just bring that into it. Lex Luthor, you have him be like Michael Rosenbaum on Smallville. That version of the character, that's what you see in the comic books these days. Man, what are you doing? Cool. High five. Close the door. But let's get specific. I'm going to go specifically with Superman because we haven't had a good, faithful, big screen interpretation since Superman 2, which is a long, long time. And I really like Man of Steel, but it went for interesting. It went for unique take rather than faithful to the character. So let's go Superman. Henry Cavill comes back. Let's just still have Henry Cavill in the mix. No need to change that up. And let's put Brad Bird steering the ship. So we know that he can do excellent storytelling, even with superheroes, because of The Incredibles. We know that he can do great live action with thrills, excitement, big stunts, humor, because we've seen Mission Impossible. Take all this together, give him Superman, and I think you can have a great movie that's faithful, that has a modern bent on it. We're not doing a throwback to Superman of the 70s because that's an outdated version of Superman. You can do a modern take that's just faithful to the comic source material. You don't have to make him mopey. That's not modernizing it. That's Zack Snyderizing it. Like, that's what it is like just taking kind of his weird, bleak, cynical worldview and pushing it onto Superman. That's not what I'm talking about modernizing. I'm talking about a fun, faithful version of it that has this hero that wants to save people, use his power for the good of others. Well, I mean, he's a loner, and it's not an anti-sadness, but that's not what Zack Snyder is. His is a bleakness, cynical. So that would be my picks. Pretty obvious, pretty safe. Veronica Palmer asks, oh, hey, Veronica. What's your list of favorite actresses? So for that one, I'm not great at picking a list of favorites, but for all-time favorite actors, Harrison Ford seems like an obvious choice. Keanu Reeves, not necessarily a great actor, but he's gotten some great roles that have suited his particular acting limitations well. Steve Carell, Mel Gibson, Sylvester Stallone, Arnold Schwarzenegger, for some ladies, Sandra Bullock, Drew Barrymore, more some of their older stuff. I don't really know what they're up to recently, but they've done some good stuff. For current people that kind of come to mind, Chris Pratt just seems really likable. Liked him on Parks and Rec, like his big budget stuff that he's been doing. Just seems to have a great personality on the internet. Just seems like a real down-to-earth guy that fame hasn't gone to his head. On the flip side of that, I like a lot of Jennifer Lawrence's stuff, but fame has gone to her head, and she said some really dumb and ignorant stuff in some interviews that have been very off-putting to me. In particular, she did an interview on wage inequality, which you can debate the merits, truthfulness of that and everything. But so at the time of this interview, she's like 23 years old and she's complaining about how much money she made versus how much Bradley Cooper made on a project, which perhaps that's a fair enough argument, except she's 22, 23, and she's talking about something that happened in the past. So she's 21, 22 at the time of this debate, in which case her as a 21, 22-year-old gets paid millions of dollars for a project. And Bradley Cooper, who was like 35, 36 at the time, who'd been working in Hollywood for 10 years longer than her, got paid more than her, likely negotiated a better contract than her. Why? Because he's 10 years older, had far more experiences, just as strong of a resume of more recent hits as she does, and knows how to negotiate a contract better than she did. And she's talking about it as if like, see, there's wage inequality in Hollywood and we need to change this. This is just not right. And it was just almost kind of offensively colorblind to what was going on. I mean, just no awareness of what was kind of going on. It was like, wait, Jennifer, you are the example of the opposite of what you're talking about. You are 25 years old and you're making $20 million a movie. You are the counterexample to what you're saying. You are the person that's saying this example of look, the glass ceiling's gone. I'm the biggest star in Hollywood. I'm an A-lister and I'm only 25. And then even before when she was getting paid less than Bradley Cooper, she's still getting paid millions of dollars. I haven't been paid millions of dollars. Is that sexism? Well, she's a woman, got paid. And so the fact that she would say things like that in kind of whether she believes it, whether she's stepping in, it's like she's totally the wrong person to mention it. She's the wrong voice to the voice of concern. And her voicing it really did any discredit to any truth to the point of any wage inequality in these regards, because she's the counterexample. And so when she says it and uses her own experience as an example of wage inequality, it just kind of, it's hard to take this position seriously. It just sounds like everyone in Hollywood is trying to step onto certain political agendas and trying to remove wage gaps, even if they don't have one. But like, see, I experienced this too. No, you didn't. You are the top 0.001%. And you were at the top 0.001% when you were 22 years old. Why are you complaining about how much money you got made? You made more money by the time you were 25 than I'm going to make in my entire lifetime, probably times a factor of 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. That's how much money you have made. Why are you talking about this? So anyway, that's a little bit of a rabbit trail, but I've liked her in a lot of stuff, especially when you get away from the more blockbustery things where they put her in weird roles where she doesn't seem to try, but where she just does more normal type characters where she just acts. I've really enjoyed her and things like that. So next question up on the list, Ryan O'Toole asks, what are your top 5 most anticipated movies of 2017? Well, I looked over a list of movies coming out for next year, tried to write them down, and I left out some things that a lot of people would think I would include, and I'm just trying to make an honest list of the movies that as I saw them, I went, yeah, I'm pretty excited to see that, and some of the ones I'm not so excited. So just going through it, John Wick 2, Kong Skull Island, Fast 8, or Fate of the Furious, I think is what they're calling it, which is a hilariously bizarre title. Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2, Wonder Woman, War of the Planet of the Apes, or is it War for the Planet of the Apes? I don't remember. Spider-Man Homecoming, I'm actually not as excited about that one as you might think. Justice League, Star Wars Episode 8, and Pitch Perfect 3. And of course, for a Valentine's family weekend to take a double date with my wife and my mother, to 50 Shades Darker. Hope you know I'm joking. That's my sense of humor. Next up on our list of questions, I got a question for you, and this is from Men vs. Movies. As a massive fan of movie scores myself, what do you feel is the best score from 2016, or what are some of your favorites? Keep it up, man. So favorite scores of 2016, not very many have actually popped to me. And so like the soundtrack to Deadpool obviously popped, as that was a lot of fun hits, but it's just kind of for the reason that it obviously would be. It was kind of one of those, hits of the past type soundtracks, and like, let's go for these cool songs from 15, 20 years ago. So that's going to resonate with me as I'm, of the right age bracket for that. And it was a fun soundtrack. As for a score, the only real score that I even remember really was Doctor Strange. And it had a couple of parts in it that sounded very derivative of Star Trek. It's from the same composer, Michael, however you pronounce his last name. And like there's at least one part in it. I heard it. And I was like, that's Star Trek. This must be Michael Giacchino. And I watched the Red Letter Media review of Doctor Strange, and they made the same point. It was like about the soundtrack sounding exactly like Star Trek. But there's other parts of the soundtrack that sounded very reminiscent of, I think it was what comes to mind was the BBC's version of Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy from 35 years ago. Which is just interesting to me. I don't know if they sound alike at all, but that's what came to my mind. It just sounded interesting. And if you've seen the movie, you know which the weird, quirky part of the soundtrack, not the main score and but the one that was like weird instrumentation and stuff. I like that one. Of all time, I'm a John Williams guy, like lots of people, because it's just so memorable, so perfect, so iconic for so many different things. I also love James Horner. I thought he's done some great stuff. So some of my favorites of all time, Superman, as well as all the Superman movies. I mean, Superman, even like Superman Returns by John Ottman, used John Williams' score and in some ways improved upon it. He took some of the less memorable parts of the Superman score and then made them really good. Man of Steel's excellent. All the Indiana Jones movies, all the Star Wars movies. All the Star Trek movies, even the bad Star Trek movies. Like Star Trek V has a great score. It's probably the most defendable thing about Star Trek V is the score, which is great. I believe I think it's Goldstein that did that one. Jurassic Park, Aliens, Back to the Future. More recently, something like Inception. There's a lot of great scores out there, and I know I'm missing some that as soon as I finish this video, I'll be like, oh man, I forgot about fill in the blank. Those are some that come to mind. Cody Leach asks, how many of your subscribers are separate channels that you created? How dare you? You will not accuse me of using other channels I have to drive up my subscribers. If you want to say something to me, you say it right to my... Cody Leach asks, if you could only take one movie, one album, and one video game on a desert island, and that somehow has power and a home theater system available, what would they be and why? So for my one movie, I don't know. I think that's the toughest one for me because of the nature of movies, and they don't have the rewatchability, even of one that I've watched a ton of times. It's not like an album that I'd listen to multiple times in a day. I wouldn't necessarily want to watch a movie multiple times a day. Movie, Indiana Jones and the Raiders of the Lost Ark, or Temple of Doom, or any of the first three. I might pick for one of those, but I could go with something totally different on a different day. A Star Wars movie. I mean, I just don't know. That's a hard one for me to pick. I'm saying an answer, but I don't really want to. As for a video game, I think I would go with Warcraft 2. I don't know if I have internet connection so I can play with other people if we have our dial-up modems that I had back in the 90s when I played that game a lot, but I loved Warcraft 2. It was kind of like designed perfectly for me the way I work, and then even though as technology advanced and game development advanced, I just always wanted to go back to Warcraft 2. It's the original Warcraft series before World of Warcraft, so you're building a city and attacking an orc city, or your orcs building a city, attacking a human city. And it was like the right level of complexity for me and my simple brain and what works for me and coming up with good strategies. I actually was in a tournament when I was in high school for a fundraiser sort of deal. I made it all the way down to the finals. We lost the first game, won the second game. Third game came down to the finals, and my partner in it used a strategy that was unwise, or it was wise if you could pull it off. He didn't get to pull it off in time. He did like an orc rush. So he had all this army of orcs, and his enemy just sent in a bunch of dragons, torched his orcs, burned his city to the ground. I held out a long time, but I lost. As for an album, which one would I pick? I would have to go with, I believe, probably Weezer's Blue album. Like I said, you got to pick one to go with you. I guess that's the one that I would go with. Since I'm there lonely, it'd be nice to have an album that has songs about only in dreams and daydreaming of being off the island. There's fun ones. There's songs about surfing. I'm on an island. So it has a variety of things on there, but just a general sense of fun. You can sing along with it while you grow lonely on your island all by yourself. I think that's what I'm going to go with. All right, Rich Reviews asks 6 questions. The first one, best and worst Japanese Godzilla movie, plus will we see Mothra and Rodan in Godzilla 2? All right, to the first part of the question, my favorite of the Japanese Godzilla movies, I haven't seen any of them. Which feels weird to me. As I say it, I'm like, wow, how has that happened? I just don't think I have. That wasn't something my parents were into. Wasn't the direction my sci-fi interest went. It wasn't my interest in Asian cinema went, because love Jackie Chan, Jet Li movies. Love the John Woo side of things over there. But Japanese films, other than the Street Fighter with Sonny Chiba, I didn't head too far down that path and never got into the Godzilla movies. As for the second half of that, will we see Mothra and Rodan? I think there's a pretty good chance that they will go in that direction. I think there's they're setting up a world bigger than just Godzilla. They seem to want to incorporate these characters, and they would be fully aware that fans want them to incorporate Mothra and Rodan. So I would say it's very likely. Next one. Has there ever been a novel based on a book that you thought the film was better than the book? I think a lot of Philip K. Dick's stories, not that the movie's just inherently better than this book, but the writing is a short story. And so something like Total Recall is just like this short story that he wrote that turned into a very fleshed out, excellent sci-fi action film with some social commentary and interesting Philip K. Dick style exploration of ideas, consciousness, and existence. Same with Blade Runner, a short story that's turned into the study of what it means to be alive. And so some really cool stuff. One that's a little bit weird for me as a grown man to say would be The Notebook. So if you've probably seen the movie, I don't know. Actually, I don't know if I should say you've probably seen the movie. So in the movie, basically it starts off and there's, 20 minutes of these two people as like teenagers. And then there's kind of this montage that's like 5-10 minutes long of everything that happens as they grow into adults, and tragedy and sadness and the new lives, the new discoveries, and so much stuff. And then, you get like 50 minutes in the movie and they start they rediscover each other, something like that. And so, but you've established how much they care for each other over a long stretch of time. The book tells the same story. A synopsis of the two would read virtually identical. But the difference is that in the book, that 30, 40, 45 minute beginning part is like just 2 or 3 pages. And the nature of the book, and it changes the vibe of it. So the story of the movie, with all the same stops, all the same exact background, but the story of the movie is this epic love story of two people that were madly in love, that were torn about by life, circumstances, class, socioeconomic differences, brought back together to discover if they're two people meant to be together. The story of The Notebook, the book, same, like I said, all the same details, but that story is really the story of a weekend love affair. And the way it plays out that way is because the emphasis of the book is so much just on these 2 days and what happened over this weekend, whereas the emphasis of the movie is on the gigantic love story that kind of comes together over a weekend. And I'm not like that's the book version of it is just kind of like this kind of smutty book for people that don't want to read an actual romance novel that's actually smutty, and so you get something that's a little bit more acceptable. Of course, in saying all this, I am admitting to you that I have read the book, The Notebook, which I shouldn't admit. I can say it's the only book like that I have ever read. And the things you do when you're in love and engaged and about to get married, you read books like The Notebook. Anyway, that would be my example, which is probably a really weird example, generally speaking. Next up, your favorite Nickelodeon game show. I'm going to go with Double Dare. I can't really remember it too much. You know, Mark Summers was the host of the show. There was slime, I do believe, but I don't remember how much the slime was from Ghostbusters and how much it was from that show and how much my memories of my childhood are just kind of meshing together. But more importantly, let's move on to something more important as we're talking about Nickelodeon game shows. As we are talking about Mark Summers, you got to talk about the show What Would You Do? Not because I actually remember the show What Would You Do from watching a ton of episodes, but because I was on an episode of What Would You Do? Now, I'll play the clip for you real quick.
Do you really?
Yeah.
What's your dog's name?
Bino.
Bino? Okay, well, why don't you come down here and help me out? And what kind of dog is Bino?
A Sheltie.
So in that clip, you see a girl is recruited to wash a dog and has a dog named Bino. By chance, I had a dog named Bino growing up, and in that clip, while that was not me that had to go wash the dog, there was someone nearby, that person wearing a pink hat, and that was me. So I'm not saying that the person in the blue hat comments on the comment section and is probably watching this video right now, but that was my sister, and that's me in the pink hat for some reason, and I'm wearing a fanny pack. Yeah. The early 90s and life choices. So yeah, I was actually on that show. My sister washed a dog. I assume, like, we had it on a VHS tape. Don't know where that VHS tape was. And then one day, like a year or two ago, I was like, hey, I wonder if they could find that on YouTube. I was preaching a sermon and tied into things. And so I was going to try and get the clip to show. Well, found it on YouTube. I didn't think I would. I didn't know what episode it was. All I knew is my sister washed a dog, and I found it actually pretty quickly. And then I looked it up again for this video, found it. There you go. That's my, I think it's pretty interesting. It's interesting to me because every episode of a show like that, there's all these kids in it, and they're all my age. They're all in their 30s now, or maybe even older than that. And that's where you just stop and think about it. And it's interesting that those people are out there. We're all grown up, and every time you see a person in a video, you go, that's a person with a whole life. Anyway, I'm getting a little bit ontological, studying the state of being. Number 4, is there a biopic you would like to see made into a film? Not really. There's none that really come to mind. I don't tend to gravitate towards biopics as something that interests me. Tend to be more interested in stories of a story, a real life event, rather than the biopic. The nature of biopics, I don't think tends to make for the best of movies, because you're essentially montaging a life, or you try and come up like a gimmick like Jobs, where I think or whichever one was the one that was the 4 episodes from his life tied to the different products. I haven't seen that one yet, so I probably botched everything I just said. But just the nature of them, watching a life like that doesn't tend to be something that entices me. So none come to mind. Worst trailer for a great movie and great trailer for a really bad movie. So worst trailer for a really great movie, I would, the kind of obvious pick from the last few years is Edge of Tomorrow. I mean, I thought the original title, All You Need Is Kill, didn't seem like a very good title. It felt too weird sci-fi to me and just too niche. And so I didn't like that. They released a picture. I didn't care too much about that. Then they released the trailer. And it looked kind of interesting. Like, it was like, okay, sci-fi, I tend to like things like this. Tom Cruise is normally pretty good. Okay, I'll probably go see this, but it'll just be kind of like a throwaway movie. So I didn't even see it in the theater. But I heard, oh no, it's really good. It's better than the trailer. And the trailer has this song playing that's so depressing. And then you see and that's the tone of the trailer. It's like, the world is going to end. Oh man, this is a bit of a downer. Then you watch the movie, and it's not like that at all. Like, that is not the tone of the movie. It's like really fun, fast moving, very inventive in how it feels like the story is progressing and moving forward. Even more so than the movie it's compared to the most, of course, is Groundhog Day. And Groundhog Day feels very much just like it's looping and the story's not progressing until you get to the end and you're like, oh, this is the end of it. Whereas with Edge of Tomorrow, they found a way so it had a story that very much felt like it was moving forward, progressing all the way up into the end. And so you could feel the first act, the second act, and the third act in good ways while being totally unique, totally interesting, and felt like it's progressing. excellent movie, bizarrely bad trailers for the movie that they made. I mean, my wife loves Edge of Tomorrow. I mean, she watches it once a month. And just loves that movie, and I don't in any way disagree with her. It's a great movie. Now, great trailers for bad movies. The recent history, the obvious picks would be Suicide Squad and Batman v Superman, and somewhat like the things that you see in the trailer that you really like about in the trailer. Those are the best elements of those movies, and then everything else about those movies is kind of a train wreck. And so there's like a fun energy, and the quipping back and forth between the characters in Suicide Squad's really good. Everything else is kind of a mess. Everything that they hid in the trailers for Suicide Squad, which is the plot of the movie, the main villains, everything going on in the movie, terrible. But what they show you in the trailers, and that's the good stuff in it. Batman v Superman, likewise, some of the epic tone of it, some of the battle shots, some of the great visuals of it, best elements of the movie. And then the plot is so convoluted, such a mess, so many bizarre elements mixed together. So that's the one that comes to mind. The classic example people will give you of a great trailer for a terrible movie is, of course, Star Wars Phantom Menace. And it's everything you hear when people say back in 1999, or I guess it's 98 when the trailer dropped. When that trailer dropped, this is the early Wild West of the internet. And so we're on dial-up still. That QuickTime file of it would, 300 megabytes or something like that. Not a gigantic file, but you'd spend I spent 2 hours downloading this deal just to watch it. Watched it over and over again. So this is the first trailer I remember doing that with. I mean, back in the day, you didn't do that. Nowadays, earlier today, a trailer dropped for Baywatch, and I was on home for my lunch break and just watched and shot a video for it. And basically all the growth on my channel comes from trailers drop on the internet, and I watch them real quick and throw up a trailer response video. And that didn't happen. That wasn't a thing. Like, trailers didn't drop, and then Star Wars Phantom Menace drops, and legitimately, it's the first one I remember watching like that, and watched it over and analyzed it. Oh my goodness, a lightsaber with it's double-sided, and we're having more this is really happening. And we look back on it now, and we pick on the CGI and some of the special effects of it. But at the time, it really, the overuse of CGI is really the problem with it, and why some of it looks so dated, not the actual CGI itself, which was very good for the time. And if it had been used better, it would have been just groundbreaking. So that one comes to mind as just one that everybody really did obsess over this. People really did just go out and buy tickets to movies to just watch the trailer for it. I don't think I did that, but I wouldn't be surprised if I did. I don't remember doing that. Maybe I was already going to go see one of the movies that it was on. And I mean, it was a very special trailer for a movie. It's like the most disappointing movie of all time. Now, his sixth question. Considering you're one of the few guys, maybe the only, were you satisfied with how Gilmore Girls wrapped up? Now, this is an interesting question because they just dropped the new miniseries that's really kind of like 4 TV movies, because each episode is 90 minutes long. That's a season of life, and there's 4 of them. So he could be asking about that, and he could be asking about the actual series itself. I have not finished the Gilmore Girls series deal yet. My wife taking it pretty seriously. She wants to watch it while something else is going on. So most of the stuff we watch, almost everything we watch, we're both on our computer, commenting on videos and stuff. I'm, working on thumbnails. But Gilmore Girls was like, no, we're going to watch this. So I've only watched 2 of the episodes. It's a good return to form. And it very much feels like they didn't skip a beat, where a lot of times when they do one of these comeback shows, it feels weird. What am I watching? Why? This is a bad idea. This one feels like it didn't really skip a beat. Everybody's back on point. The writing's still on point. It works. And this is what the show was, following their lives as they go through it. Few additional thoughts beyond that. Looking at Rory with a big chunk of time passed between everything is kind of an awful human being. She's got a boyfriend she doesn't care about. She's cheating with another guy, sleeping around. I mean, and she was doing that during the show, and you just think through it and you just go, she still feels entitled, whiny, and you ignore it because she's kind of fun, quirky, and charming. But her actual character is not good. Like, character as in values is not good as a character. Also, I don't know, just like there's been multiple references in just the 2 episodes, maybe even just 1 episode, to Lena Dunham, as if everyone loves Lena Dunham and just want to give each other a high five. Yeah, reference her. She's awesome. And that's the way she's talked about on the show, as if she's like a hero to everybody. And I don't know if that's like an East Coast, West Coast deal where people on the coasts love her. I don't know a single person in real life that watches the show Girls. I don't know anybody in real life that's ever said a positive thing about Lena Dunham. She's like viewed as this horrible, horrible human being for good reasons, of like writing flippantly about stuff that should be a red flag that maybe she molested her sister. Very much like you read it and you go, what? That's weird. That's a red flag. And it has no self-awareness in what she wrote. When people called her out on it, she didn't respond with any sort of normal response that was like, oh, I said that wrong. I should have phrased that differently. She wrote it as if like, you people are sick. She wrote horrible things about Odell Beckham, the football player. She just said horrible things about him in an interview, as if she could just say stuff that was like, assuming about his views on her sexually and I mean, it was just terrible things to say about another person. Like, she didn't know that like you can't do that, and had to like apologize several times because she kept writing horrible. And then you're just watching Gilmore Girls and they're talking about her like she's a superhero. Everybody loves her, right? Like, no, nobody loves her outside of it. Like, New England or California. Like, I don't know who the fans are because none of them are people I know in real life. So that really tainted my watching it. Now I'm talking way too long about stuff, but to your question, dude, I love how the show Gilmore Girls wrapped up. The actual TV show, no, it was very rushed, very sudden, kind of came out of the blue. My understanding is they're at the 7th season, getting towards the end of it, and they think it's the end of that season. And you've got some storylines that are about to come to an end and moving on in life and things like this. And then the show's canceled like May 1st or something like that, is my understanding. So the episode, it's like Rory is like, all right, I'm going to move on, take this job, breaks up with her boyfriend. And then they're supposed to be like a party or something, and it's going to fall through. Luke and Lorelai have broken up, and then Luke throws a party for Rory. And so it's like, oh, Rory had a great party. And Lorelai looks at Luke with googly eyes, and it's like, oh. But it's just like the end of it. Like, I mean, this is kind of because of the nature. It's like a back and forth constantly of characters back together, breaking up. And so Rory getting a new job and breaking up with her boyfriend. I've been there, done that. Luke and Lorelai kind of getting together. And Luke doing a very big gesture because he really cares about Rory and Lorelai. Of course. I mean, that was kind of every season kind of ends like that. Either they get together or they break up. And so it's kind of like, all right. I mean, it's not bad, but I mean, it's just kind of, all right, this happened one more time. Very unsatisfying. An appropriate ending would be like Luke and Lorelai actually getting married, Rory actually getting married, taking a job and moving to California away from her mother. And so the Gilmores are apart from each other. Something like that, which is not what it ended with at all. I think that'll do it for our Q&A time today. Thank you so much for watching. If you've got any other questions, throw them in the comment section. I'll try and remember to bring them back for future installments of Q&A or answer them at some point in time. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for subscribing. It's been a lot of fun the last several months. And if anything, it's only getting more and more exciting as more and more of you participating, commenting, joining in the discussion. And thank you for watching.